I've been having the weirdest dreams lately, Renee mused, her eyes distant as she stirred her morning coffee. Again. Steve looked up from his newspaper, one eyebrow arched skeptically. Still about that Tate woman? Renee nodded, her gaze lingering on the black and white photo of Sharon Tate in the article he had open. Every night it's the same thing. Woodstock, 1969, and she's there, smiling, just before. You know. The silence between them grew thick as Steve folded the paper, his face a mask of concern. Renee, you can't keep doing this to yourself. Doing what? She snapped, her voice edged with irritation. I'm just telling you what I've seen. Dash. The day started like any other, the sun peeking over the horizon, painting the sky a soft pink. Renee had decided to visit the library, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain her vivid, recurring dreams. The librarian, a kind, elderly woman, had suggested a book on historical events that had occurred during Woodstock. As Renee flipped through the pages, her eyes fell upon an article about Sharon Tate, the pregnant actress who had been brutally murdered by the Manson family. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized the woman from her dreams was real. Dash. The house was a relic of a bygone era, a sprawling mansion nestled in the hills of Los Angeles. The once celebrated abode now stood as a grim reminder of the horrors that had unfolded 6 years prior. Renee parked her car outside, her palms sweaty on the steering wheel. She had read about this place in her research, but seeing it in person was a surreal experience. The gates were open, the property seemingly abandoned. She stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath her feet as she approached the house. Dash. The air grew thick with an eerie sense of déjà vu as Renee wandered through the unkempt garden. She could almost hear the distant echoes of laughter and music, a stark contrast to the solemn silence that hung over the place now. As she stepped into the house, a sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her, sending a shiver down her spine. Her heart racing, she called out into the darkness, "Sharon? Are you here?" The house remained silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere in the depths of the mansion. The musty scent of old books and dust filled her nostrils as she descended into the basement. A door, partially hidden by a tattered velvet curtain, beckoned her. Renee pushed it open to reveal a room that looked as though it had been frozen in time. The walls were adorned with psychedelic posters and the floor was littered with vinyl records and candle wax. In the center of the room, a strange, pulsating light emanated from an object that looked like a cross between a crystal ball and an antique radio. The light grew brighter as she approached, and she felt an inexplicable pull towards it. With trembling hands, Renee reached out to touch the light. The moment her fingertips made contact, the world around her spun out of control. A dizzying sensation overwhelmed her, and she stumbled backward. The light grew more intense, blinding her. And then, with a deafening crack, she was thrown through time itself. She found herself standing in the very same room, but it was August 8, 1969, and the party was in full swing. The sound of laughter and music filled her ears, a stark contrast to the silence she had left behind. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of the infamous Manson family members. A sense of urgency grew within her as she realized she had been sent back to the fateful night of the murders. She had to find Sharon Tate and warn her, but first, she had to navigate the crowded basement without being noticed. The room was a maze of bodies, the smell of incense and sweat thick in the air. The light from the crystal radio faded, leaving her in the dim glow of candles and lava lamps. The vibrations of a distant guitar riff grew louder as she made her way through the throng of people. She spotted a group huddled in the corner, their faces obscured by shadows. One of them looked up, a chill running down her spine as she recognized the cold gaze of Charles Manson. The light from the crystal had been a beacon, drawing her to this moment. She took a deep breath and steeled herself for what was to come, knowing she had only one chance to change the course of history. Renee pushed through the crowd, her heart hammering in her chest. She had to find Sharon before it was too late. As she ascended the stairs, the cacophony of the party grew louder, the laughter more feverish. The house pulsed with energy, a stark contrast to the horror she knew was about to unfold. She stumbled into a room, where a group of people sat in a circle, passing a joint and sharing stories. Above them, a poster of the Beatles peered down, seemingly oblivious to the impending doom. In the corner, she saw her, Sharon Tate, her belly swollen with life, her smile radiant. Renee felt a knot in her throat as she approached, her voice barely above a whisper. Sharon, it's me, Renee. I know this is going to sound crazy, but you're in danger. You have to leave. Sharon's eyes widened, a hint of fear flitting across her features. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice thick with the haze of the party. Renee swallowed hard, the words sticking in her throat. The Manson family. They're coming tonight. They're going to. She couldn't finish the sentence, the weight of the words too heavy. Panic flared in Sharon's eyes, but she remained eerily calm. Who are you? She demanded, her hand protectively cradling her belly. I'm from the future, Renee blurted out, knowing how ridiculous it sounded. I've had these dreams. I know what happens. You, your friends, everyone here, you're all in danger. Sharon's gaze searched hers, looking for some semblance of truth. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she nodded, rising from the floor. Okay, she said, her voice steady. We're leaving. They moved quickly, slipping through the party-goers like ghosts. The house was a labyrinth, each room a potential hiding place for the killers. The air grew tense, the laughter now a cacophony of doom. They gathered the others, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Renee felt the walls closing in, the pressure of her mission weighing heavily upon her. As they approached the front door, a shadow fell over them. Renee spun around, her heart in her throat. There, blocking their path, were the 4 Manson family members she had seen in her dreams. The room grew quiet, the only sound the distant throb of music from the party outside. You're not supposed to be here, one of them snarled, her eyes narrowing. Renee stepped in front of Sharon, her heart racing. You're not supposed to do this, she countered, her voice firm. You don't have to follow him. You can choose a different path. The woman's gaze flickered, a hint of doubt crossing her face. But it was only for a moment. You don't understand, she spat, her hand moving to the knife at her side. The world seemed to slow down as Renee's mind raced. She knew she couldn't fight them all, couldn't save everyone. But she had to try. In a desperate move, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the crystal she had brought from the future. It glowed with a fierce, pulsing light. The Manson family members stumbled back, their eyes wide with terror. The crystal grew hot in her hand, the light blinding. The room around her began to distort, the walls bending and stretching. Renee knew she had to act fast. Take it, she yelled to Sharon, tossing the crystal in her direction. Use it to get out. Sharon caught the crystal, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. She looked at Renee for a split second, then made her decision. She turned and ran, her friends following close behind. The Manson family members were momentarily disoriented, giving them enough time to escape. Renee watched them go, her chest heaving. The light grew brighter, the room spinning. The sound of the party faded into the background as she felt herself being pulled back through time. The room grew darker, the air thick with the stench of fear. The Manson family members had recovered, their eyes now fixed on her with a newfound fury. You bitch, one of them snarled, lunging forward. But the pull was too strong. The world around her warped and twisted until she was once again in the quiet, dusty library basement. The crystal lay shattered at her feet, its light extinguished. She stumbled back, her legs giving out beneath her. The house was still, the grandfather clock ticking away the seconds like a metronome to the rhythm of her racing heart. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes, as Renee sat in the dark, her mind racing. She had failed. The images of the night's events played on a loop in her head, each one more gruesome than the last. Her stomach churned with guilt and despair. But then she heard it, the faint sound of a car door closing, the crunch of gravel. She rushed to the window, peering out into the night. There, standing outside the gates, was Sharon Tate. She looked up at the house, her eyes searching, and for a moment, it seemed like she was looking directly at Renee. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Renee's heart soared with hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had changed the course of history. The following morning, she woke up to the sound of Steve's voice downstairs. She stumbled into the kitchen, her mind still reeling from the events of the night before. He took one look at her and knew something was wrong. "Renee, what happened?" Renee took a deep breath, the words spilling out of her in a rush. "I went back to 1969. I saw it all. The house, the party, the Manson family." She paused, her eyes welling up with tears. "But I think I changed something. I gave Sharon the crystal. She's alive, Steve. She's alive." Steve looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "Renee, you're not making any sense." "Look," she said, her voice urgent as she pointed to the newspaper on the counter. The headline read, "Pregnant actress Sharon Tate found alive after night of terror." The article spoke of an anonymous tip that had led the police to the house, where they had found the Manson family members apprehended by the authorities. The murders had been thwarted. Renee's hand trembled as she held the paper up. "It worked," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "I saved her." The days that followed were a blur of questions and disbelief. She knew she had altered the past, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. The future she had left behind was no longer set in stone. It was malleable, changeable, and with that power came responsibility. Every night, she dreamed of the Manson family members, their eyes filled with a rage that seemed to transcend time itself. The house in the hills called to her, whispering secrets of a world she had only just touched. Renee knew that she couldn't stay in the past, but she also knew that she couldn't ignore the pull of the present. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, the phone rang. It was Sharon Tate on the other end, her voice shaky but alive. "Thank you," she said, her words heavy with emotion. "For saving me and my baby,